By the end of this tutorial, you will understand what LangChain Runnable is, the LangChain Runnable protocol, and the different core Runnable types. So what exactly is LangChain Runnable? Runnables in LangChain provide a structured way to define, execute, and manage tasks within a pipeline. So with Runnable, you can easily combine different components using a pipe operator to build workflow for complex chain. So at the core of Runnables, we also have the Runnable protocols, which are of different methods. So we are going to mention a few out of these different methods. So we have the stream, we have the invoke, and we have the batch. Also, all these different methods, they also have the asynchronous version as well. So if you are using invoke, batch, and stream, you can use them with their asynchronous methods. Now let's look at the different types of runnables that we have in LangChain. So we have the RunnableLambda, the RunnablePassthrough, RunnableSequence, and the RunnableParallel. So we also have more than these, so we just listed a few out of the different runnable types that we have. So when we are talking about the RunnableLambda actually allows developers to define custom data transformation using Lambda function. So it's just like before sending data to a chain, we can quickly pre-process our data. So before we pass it along to the chain. So this is just the work of RunnableLambda. While the RunnableSequence, so the sequence actually works in a way whereby if we have two runnables, they can be chained together into sequence, whereby the output of the previous runnable is passed as input to the next runnable. So the RunnableSequence can be likened to the pipe operator because they work the same way. So now let's talk about the RunnablePassthrough. So the RunnablePassthrough is a simple runnable that actually takes an input and returns it unchanged. So we usually use RunnablePassthrough whenever we need to pass data through a pipeline without modifying it. So we're going to look at how all these different types of runnable works in our code. So the last one we're going to be discussing is the RunnableParallel. RunnableParallel is designed to execute multiple runnable objects concurrently. So it's just like a way for us to execute multiple runnables at the same time. So we don't have to wait for the first one before the second one actually runs. So now we're going to go to our code and look at how we can use all these different core runnable types in our demonstration. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at how we can do like a little data transformation using RunnableLambda. So let's define our function. So now let's use the RunnableLambda. Then we're going to pass in our function inside the RunnableLambda. So with this runnable, we're going to do runnable.invoke. So let's say we pass in maybe, let's pass in something like 2 or any value. So let's see what's going to give us. Yeah, I need to run this. Then run that. So when we use runnable.invoke, we have 4. So let's say with this runnable, let's try to do something like a batch where we demonstrate how we can use the batch, because we just demonstrated how we can use the invoke method. So let's say we want to use the batch method, for instance. So we're going to do runnable.batch. Yes, so we have 468. The result as 468. So also when we're using the RunnableLambda, we can use it in, if we want to pass in the usual lambda function. So we can do this instead. So we can say runnable values we are passing in. So we just define a lambda function like this. So let's just copy what we have here. So we could do it probably this way. Yeah, so which is just like we are telling it like we're going to pass in a value, which is by we defining the hex. So we're saying we're going to pass in a value. So whenever we call the runnable.invoke, any value that we pass in is going to get executed here. So which is what we saw. And while the batches is just like each values that were passed, then it performed the operation on them. So this is just a way for us to use the RunnableLambda. So we explained while we were going through the slides that the RunnableLambda is usually used for data transformation. So we still have more of data transformation which we can use with the RunnableLambda. So let's do something like be great. Then we pass in. Then let's pass in name. So we're going to wrap this inside the RunnableLambda. So we're going to say, let's copy what we have here. So we're going to pass this inside the RunnableLambda. It's just to demonstrate how we can use the RunnableLambda. So let's say we want to pass in our function. So we can say great. So it's just like saying we're going to pass in a value whenever we call in this RunnableLambda. So again, we're going to do runnable.invoke, say John. So print results. Yeah, so what we just did is just like with the RunnableLambda we can pass in any value. So which is what we did here. We pass in the John, which is what we want to transform inside our function. So and we already call in the function here by passing the actual value, which is John, that was passed into the main function. So based on what we define inside this function, let's say we want to do like a very each transformation. So we can pass in our parameters and carry out the transformation here. And whenever we're calling the RunnableLambda, we can invoke with whatsoever the value that we want to pass in into our function. So this is just like another example of how we can use the RunnableLambda. But let's look at how we can use the RunnableSequence. So let's define something whereby we look at the lowercase of a word. So let's say we have an input data like this. Let's say we want to replace the spaces and use something like an hyphen. Saves. Okay, so let's define more functions. So now these are the data transformation that we're going to carry out on this test. So the first thing is we're going to change it to a lowercase. We're going to replace the spaces with an hyphen. So also we're going to summarize the test where we calculate the number of words that we have. And as well, we're going to append a test whenever we are done. So now let's look at how we can do that where we combine the RunnableLambda and the RunnableSequence. So let's see how we can do that. So we pass in our function. So now we've passed in all our different functions inside the RunnableLambda. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to pass each of these RunnableLambda to the RunnableSequence. So I'm going to show us how we can pass it to the RunnableSequence. Pen notes Runnable. So now we've passed in our RunnableLambda inside our RunnableSequence. So if we look at what's going on from the first that we have here, so it's just like telling us like the output that we have from the first is going to be passed to the middle, and the output of the middle is going to be passed as input to the last. So this is what is going on inside this particular chain. So now from what we've done, so we can invoke and pass in our input data. So we can do results. So let's print our results. So from the results below, we can see what the RunnableSequence was doing, which was acting as the chain where we were sending the result of one as the input of the other. While the RunnableLambda, we could see what it did from the changing to lowercase, replace spaces. So from our output, we can see like it was able to perform all these data transformation based on what we defined inside our functions. So now, everything that we've done was just like doing the transformation and chaining. So we've not actually sent it to the large language model. So we're going to look at how we can do that. So before we do that, there's also something that we need to know with the pipe operator. So instead of using the RunnableSequence, we could actually use the pipe operator to chain all these multiple RunnableLambda together. So instead of using the RunnableSequence, we could do something like saying summarize Runnable. Then we use the pipe operator to bring them together. We can do chain.invoke, and we pass in our input data. So we should have the same results with what we did earlier. So we can see the results is actually the same thing. So we could actually send these results to a large language model. So what we're going to do is from what we have here, we just need to make it look more neater, where we take out some function and we can pass in our prompt template. So let's see how we can send it to a large language model. So let's use the RunnableSequence. Okay, so we're going to define our prompt templates. Okay, so we're going to do something whereby we say generate a short description for this term. Okay, so let's define our model. Can call it LLM. So chat OpenAI. Let's define our temperature as 0.7 and use the model name as GPT-4 mini. So now what we want to do is we want to send the results of what we have from this RunnableSequence, because we mentioned earlier like we've done the data transformation and we brought in different part of the different functions together using the RunnableSequence. So now we want to send it to a large language model. So this is what we're going to do. We're going to do something like full chain. Then we're going to use the pipe operator to bring everything together. So this is coming from the RunnableSequence. Okay, so we're going to pass in the prompts. LLM. So we're going to use our string output parser as well. Okay. So let's define the input data. I think we should use something. Okay. Okay, we want this to be replaced. Okay, let me use what we have here previously. So let's say we only want to extract this LangChain from it. So I think we need to adjust function. Okay. So I think what we should do is under this replace spaces, I think we can change it to maybe let's split. So we can split by so this is just to demonstrate how the RunnableLambda and everything works. Okay, if we split by this, so we are extracting only the LangChain. So okay, so just like RunnableLambda is going to do the extraction and transformation for us, then we're going to bring all the different RunnableLambda together with sequence. Okay, so now from the prompt template, just like we said, the pipe operator takes in the output of the order and pass it as the input of the next. So this chain, whatsoever our result is from here, is going to send it to the prompt, which is our prompt template. So what our prompt template will be expecting is actually expecting a value. So what we did here, we said generate a short description for term. So it's expecting us to send in a particular input. So anything that comes from here actually goes to the prompt template. So then next thing to do is we're going to do results. Let's say results is equal to. So now we can invoke full chain dot invoke. So let's invoke our input data. So print results. Yeah, so let's print our results. Yeah, so we have our results, which is our large language model. So it was able to define the LangChain in a very short description. So just like what we have above, so the only thing the prompt template is taking is this LangChain because we've done a data transformation using the RunnableLambda. So before we pass it into our prompt template, then to the large language model, and after the large language model, it was passed to the string output parser, which actually make us have a more structured output. So now we have looked at how we can use the RunnableLambda and the RunnableSequence. So the next thing we're going to look at is the RunnablePassthrough. So let's copy what we have from our earlier prompt templates. So but here we're going to do something like okay, so let's say what is So let's say our runnable is equal to let's call it runnable chain since we get to use different things. So the first thing is let's first pass in the prompts and let's pass in the large language model and our output parser as a string output parser. Okay, so but the first thing we need to pass in before the prompt is the runnable pass-through. So whenever we are passing the runnable pass-through, it's always good to put it in a dictionary. It's always good to put it in a dictionary because the value we are passing from the prompt template, so it can be directly passing to the prompt. So we have the norm, prompt. So the runnable pass-through is not making any modification. So the 10 that is coming from here is actually passing the 10 directly to the prompt and to the large language model and to the string output parser. So if we run it, we can see what is here, which is 20 multiplied by 10 is 200. So there's no transformation here. So it just passed the value along. So we're going to use a combination of the runnable pass-through and the RunnableLambda and see how we can get historical events using different dates, or let's say using the current date. So we're going to call in our dates. So from datetime, import datetime. So let's get to this date. So let's return datetime.today. Day. Let's copy these prompts. So we want to say lists significant historical events that occurred on, let's say, today. So include a brief description. So for each description of each. Okay, let's list the number of significants. Let's use n. Okay, so our prompt template is expecting us to pass in two different variables. Let's define our chain. Then together, hello lamb. Let's copy this guy, string output parser. Okay. So before this, we need to pass in here, we need to pass in the values. So which are the values for our prompt templates, so the variables. So what we're saying is today is going to be sent in from our function. So we're going to use the RunnableLambda here. So RunnableLambda, we pass in get today. Okay, so you know we have two different variables. So the next one, we're going to pass in the second variable, so which is the hen. So now let's use this RunnablePassthrough just to demonstrate. Okay, so let's put in the chain operator. So we've added the RunnableLambda and we've added the RunnablePassthrough. So these are the values we are sending to our prompts. So which is taking the get today function, which is what we are passing to the RunnableLambda. So we calculate the actual day. So this today is going to send it to the prompt template. And this RunnablePassthrough is not sending any values. So that means we need to, whenever we call a chain.invoke, we need to send the actual value, because this is obviously not sending anything. So we need to send in our value. So the RunnablePassthrough we sent it to send the value directly to the prompt template. So we're going to do chain.invoke. Let's do 2. So we just want to see 2 different values. So let's use print. Okay, let's run it. Yeah, so we can see what it actually gave us. So we are taking this exact date, then just like what we said, we are looking for 2 historical events that occurred on this date with a brief description of what the event was about. So we have the 1990 and 1975. The first one was about Nelson Mandela. The second one was the first successful heart transplant which occurred. So this are the information that was sent. So at least from what we see here, we have an idea of how we can use the RunnablePassthrough, then using the RunnableLambda, which we use for our transformation before we pass it into our prompt template and to the large language model. So the last one we are going to be discussing is the RunnableParallel. So I'm going to show us how we can use the RunnableParallel. The RunnableParallel is just a way for us to execute multiple runnable objects at the same time. So we're going to look at how we can do that. So we'll go up, let's copy what we did inside the RunnableLambda. So let's copy one of these simple function. So let's say we have double. Let's have this 3 different function. Let's have hard, then squared. Okay. So here will be addition. Okay, so we have these 3 different functions. So let's see how we can use the RunnableParallel. So let's call this maybe Runnable1. So the last one is squared. So let's use the sequence again by saying Runnable1. So I think let's use the pipe operator here. Then let's pass the runnable. Now we can use the RunnableParallel here. So let's set the RunnableParallel. Then this is how you define the RunnableParallel. So you take the dictionary. So let's say we want to call this multiplied, then Runnable2. And this should be add, not multiply. The first one is double, which is the multiplied. So let's call this addition, when the last one is the squared. That's Runnable3. Okay. So what we are saying is the result of Runnable1 should be passed to what we have here. So which is the meaning of the chain operator. So what the RunnableParallel is going to do is it's going to handle each of these separately. Each of these objects is going to handle them separately. So addition will be handled separately, whereby squared is going to be handled separately. So let's say the results from what is coming from here is 2. So the 2 is going to pass independently to both. Okay, so let's see how we can do that. So let's say print sequence.invoke. Yeah, let's say we are passing to run this. Yeah, so we can see the result for addition was calculated separately and the result for squared was calculated separately. So this is just what the RunnableParallel is. Parallel is just like a way to handle two different tasks at the same time. Okay, so let's see how we can use the batch here as well. So let's say we are sending batch. So we are using the sequence.batch here. We are sending list of multiple inputs. For instance, let's use something like maybe 3 and 4. Yeah, let's do 3 and 4. This should be in brackets, another brackets. Yeah, so we are sending 3 and 4. So 3 is going to be handled separately. So 3 is going to take 3, do that. 4 is going to take that, do that. So that's why we have two different results, because they are batches. So each is going to be calculated based on the addition and the squared. So this is just how we can use the RunnableParallel. So now let's try to look at something a bit different. Maybe we can use some of the things that we've done earlier. So let's take something like this chain and we try to use RunnableParallel in it. So we can change what is here. So let's pass in a different prompt. Let's do what is the capital of So country. So this is going to be prompt 1 because we want to handle different tags. So let's say we have another prompt, maybe prompt 2. How many states exist in this? So we want to send in different prompts. So this is the first prompt, which is prompt 1. So here we're going to pass in something like the country, which is going to be passed through the Runnable pass-through. So whatever we use to invoke, the Runnable pass-through, we send it in directly as it is. Then we are sending it to the prompts, then to the large language model, and to the string output parser. So now let's define another chain. So let's say this is chain 1 and 2. Let's actually look messy. So let's do prompt 2. This chain 1. So we're just giving it an input name. So let's use states is equal to chain 2. Okay. So now let's print by invoking the chain by saying combine chain dot invoke. So let's use country like maybe United Kingdom. Okay. So let's look at what we have above again. So we define the prompts, which is the first prompt and the second prompt. These are just tasks that we want them to be handled at the same time using the RunnableParallel. So then we pass in the RunnablePassthrough here, which whatsoever that we use to invoke will be passed along to the prompts and to the large language model and to the string output parser. So because we are sending in the same inputs, so which is what we're going to send to the chain 1 and the chain 2. So that's why we have one single test which we are using to invoke on both. So here we are sending in the value. So we pass in our chain 1 and the chain 2, which is what we already combined. So we want them to be run parallel. So let's look at our results. Yeah, from what we have here, we can see the capital of United Kingdom is London. The United Kingdom consists of 4 countries, blah blah blah. So this country has its own districts and governments. So this is what is telling us about the states, and this is what is telling us about the capital. So based on the input name that you pass here is what is going to send in as a dictionary as the output. So which is what we have from the results below. So this is the end of this tutorial. I hope this tutorial was helpful in demonstrating how you can use the LangChain Runnables. So if you have any questions, please drop them below, and please ensure to subscribe to my channel so you can be aware whenever I drop any related content like this. Thank you for watching. I would love to see you next time.